Okay.
All right, then. This is the one.
We go for it this time.
Absolutely right. The top one for us. Here we go.
How you doing? You know, the American media has brought Glasnost hook, line, and sinker, pals, all right? As a matter of fact, Gorbachev couldn't have hired a better agency than Brokaw, Rather, and Jennings. I say it's time that the truth is told, and we're going to tell it next on the Morton Downey Jr. Show. Come on. Welcome to our program tonight. Joining me at home base, let me introduce Councilman Noah Deere, Chairman of the Subcommittee for Human Rights, New York City. Councilman, how are you tonight?
This is me.
Councilman, I'm sorry, I'm pointing the wrong way. How are you tonight?
I'm doing all right.
Nice to see you, sir. And Martin Coleman, who is the Director of Communications, the American Foundation for Resistance International. How are you tonight?
Fine, thank you.
Nice to have you on the stage with us. We've heard a lot in the past few weeks about Glasnost. Let's take a look at a recent guest on this show. Are our monitors out here where our audience can see this, all right? A recent guest was Victor Linick, and let's find out what Victor had to say. Victor, shoot your mouth off.
It means a lot more of democratization back home.
Democratization in what sense, sir? You're going to have free elections?
In terms of people have a lot more.
All the time.
People have a lot more of say in the way the country is run. People have now much greater input into how things are decided in my country. That's what Glasnost shortly is about.
Councilman, are you buying that?
That's a lot of hogwash. I was just returned 2 weeks ago, a week before the summit, and I can tell you that the Jews behind the Iron Curtain are still not free to leave when they want to leave. People cannot freely walk around where they want to, cannot change jobs unless they have permission. It's a state secret, everything that goes on that takes place in that country.
It's not just Jews that can't leave, it's a lot of other people can't leave.
No one has a right to leave. They don't want anybody to leave.
How about
Human rights affects everybody there.
Martin, do you buy the Glasnost bull?
Well, I wish it were true. And in fact, what has happened since Gorbachev has returned to the Soviet Union is more repression. There is the Glasnost Press Club, which is a group of people who have formed independent journals, underground journals in the Soviet Union, to fulfill the promise of Glasnost and the words of Gorbachev. And in fact, they have been repressed, and more than 100 of them have been arrested in the last 48 hours, and their electricity has been shut off, and their families have been repressed and harassed. Glasnost is a policy by which the West shall think that there are political reforms, and yet perestroika is something in which it's for domestic consumption to sell economic reforms at home.
And what's so amazing is that the media in this country, which supposedly is Glasnost, never reports this stuff. They keep the old smooth pablum flowing.
6 months ago, Natan Sharansky, a famous former prisoner, testified before my committee and said to us that the Soviets have hired a fancy Madison Avenue PR firm and the Americans have hired a Moscow PR firm. You can have said it better in your introduction. They have done a tremendous PR job, and the press is buying it. The people are buying it.
Yeah, sure. You take a look at the polls.
That's right.
They love Gorby. Gorbachev's dolls are selling bigger than Cabbage Patch dolls now.
They say he could be the next presidential...
You're right, and some of them are saying he could be the Democratic nominee.
Not at
and he'd fit right in with the Democratic Party, too. As a matter of fact. Well, let me ask both of you gentlemen. If Glasnost is the new openness, as we've heard some of our guests on previous shows say, really, what's the difference between this and détente 10 years ago? That was another term the Russians used.
The difference is that this has a very carefully calculated purpose. The Soviet government is out of cash. The Soviet government needs to finance its wars in Afghanistan and elsewhere. And in order to get most favored nation trade status, which it needs from the United States, it needs a waiver of the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. And there are some in the Jewish community who will encourage that once 15 to 25,000 Jews are released. And it is the position...
You think they should encourage it? Once 15 to 25,000? Let's face it, there's about 2.5 million Jews in the Soviet Union. About 400,000 of them would like to get out and go to Israel. All right, so that's fully a fifth of the Jewish population of the Soviet Union would like to leave. Do you think if they just let out 25,000,
I think it's dangerous to use the number games because we don't know how many want to leave, how many are exactly are there, and that's the game that they're using on us because what they're saying to us that those numbers are fiction. Mm-hmm. What we have to say, and that's the position we have to take, human rights is linked with any type of agreement that we have with the Soviet Union. What Reagan failed to do in this last summit was to fail to link any type of agreement with human rights. What Reagan wants is the Nobel Prize to leave after Iran, the scam, and he'd like to leave with a great big pomp and circumstance. And that's why he would do any type of agreement, even though it's not linked with anything.
Are you opposed to the nuclear agreement?
Any type of agreement that doesn't have linkage, and the Soviets are winning over us. Do you think this last agreement means anything? It's a joke. The Soviets are going to continue doing their own thing. They're going to stop and do away with all their warheads.
How about it, Martin? I don't want to get into the nuclear agreement because we don't have the text with us here. But is there any benefit from that agreement? If 10% of it is accurate, are we a better world for having a 10% less chance of a nuclear war?
But have we?
I don't know.
That's the question.
I don't know.
There are serious questions as to whether the INF agreement is enforceable, whether you can verify it. But quite apart from that, it goes to something much more deep. We have an agreement now called the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, 1975, popularly known as the Helsinki Accords. The Helsinki Accords involve security in Europe. They involve arms. They involve the INF Accord. They also involve...
Which I believe was signed by the Soviet Union, too, wasn't it?
It was indeed. They solemnly agreed to these agreements.
Isn't that a human rights agreement also?
It also encompasses human rights. All of these issues were all encompassed in the Helsinki Accords. And, by the way, they are not linked. We have been sold a bill of goods that says that we are trying to link these issues. Actually, that's wrong. There's no linkage. As Sakharov said, these are not linked issues. They are multifaceted sides of one issue. Do you feel safer knowing that all the peace activists in the Soviet Union are in prison?
Yeah, of course, and the answer is no. And do I feel safe knowing that we're looking for all kinds of linkages with the Soviet Union, which we never will demand, and yet by the same token we're willing to spit in the face of South Africa, all right? And all of a sudden South Africa, no, is an outlaw nation, but we'll deal with these, as Ronald Reagan is now prone not to say, the evil empire, and that's exactly what they are. It's an evil empire, and all of us have seen their treaties destroyed for the last 40 years. What the hell's the matter with us?
I have a better question. If Peter Boda came to this country, you think every congressman and senator would want to embrace him and take a picture with him? And yet Gorbachev came here, who was a worse human rights violator than Mr. Boda, and we end up shaking his hand and wanting to meet with him, and all kinds of agreements without not a two-way street.
You've been to the Soviet Union a couple of times, right?
Right.
When you went a few years ago, what was it like, quickly?
Well, 6 months ago we went. That was the beginning of Glasnost. And it was not different than the stories that I've heard over the years. It's a country does not allow for freedom.
What was it like when you went a couple of weeks ago?
A couple of weeks ago, the same way. The only thing that Glasnost is, it's good for the tourists. You weren't followed as much as previously. Your phones supposedly weren't as bugged as much as you were last time. And the only thing I found at Glasnost is that the refuseniks who would not call you or reach out to you were now calling you in the hotel. That's the only thing Glasnost allows.
Well, that seems to be quite a move forward, though, doesn't it?
Quite a move forward. They're doing something that anyone has a right to do all over the world, to make a phone call. All they're doing is saying hello to me. All they're asking, requesting that we keep them in mind and have them in mind when we are doing any type of negotiation.
All right, we're going to find out whether the Russians really love Russia, all right? Even the Russians don't have that great love for Mother Russia. Next on that. Our guest at home base with us tonight again, Martin Coleman, who is with the American Foundation for Resistance International, and Councilman Noah Deer, who is subcommittee chairman for the Human Rights Commission of New York City. Martin, you were going to explain something regarding the Helsinki Accords there.
Yes, I mean, while, you know, we all are hopeful that glasnost will work and all the rest of that, still we have to look at the reality of it. And if you just do, as we were discussing before, the numbers game, if 15,000 get out or 25,000 get out, what about those that remain? The rhetorical question we should ask ourselves is, did the life of the people in Nazi Germany, the Jews who were left in Nazi Germany, was their life improved by those who got out in the 1930s?
No, as a matter of fact, it was made worse.
Much worse.
Yeah.
Many didn't survive.
It was absolutely made worse. Joining us at the Loudmouth is Victor Kozlovsky. Victor, good evening to you. He's a journalist with the New Soviet Word.
I'm Vladimir.
So you left them, I believe. And he left in 1974. Let me ask you a question, please, if you don't mind, Vladimir. Briefly give us your background when you were in the Soviet Union.
I was an expert in Indian languages, but then I started hobnobbing with the dissidents. So the government didn't like me, and I didn't like the government, so when I left, there were no hearts broken.
You didn't like the government, and the government didn't like you. Did you leave voluntarily, or did they force you out?
Well, both, I would say. But I'm happy they didn't keep me, and I'm sure they were happy I left.
I think that we all know about the next generations of Americans. In fact, there are a few hundred of them here tonight, the next generation of Americans, all right? We're pretty proud. Tell us about the new generation of the Soviets. What's the next generation of the Soviets like?
Some are on drugs, some are apathetic,
Sounds like you're talking about Greenwich Village.
Yeah, very much so. Some want to win the Afghan war, some want to lose it. Some listen to heavy rock. It's the only graffiti you see in Moscow these days, the Beatles and heavy rock.
Well, what's wrong? Well, maybe there's hope for the next generation if they're listening to some rock. Nothing wrong with that, is
Well,
there?
absolutely. My prediction is give them 300 years, they're going to be like Portugal. Absolutely. I'm very optimistic.
300 years. All right.
And Portugal isn't such a bad place. It's a terrific place.
Well, you say that the Soviet generation coming along now is almost a decadent generation.
Well, some are. There must be millions who are happily serving in the army and killing somebody in Afghanistan.
Are they happy to be serving in the army and killing people in Afghanistan?
Lots of people in every country who are happy to go to foreign lands and meet some interesting people and kill them.
You think the same is true about America?
Well, there must be people like that here. You tell me about America. I've only been here 13 years, and you've been here.
Are you a United States citizen?
No, not yet.
Why not? No. Why not? Didn't you want to become an American citizen?
Oh, I applied. Already passed my interview for
Oh, you did?
citizenship. So
Okay.
I'm going to get one.
Are you a KGB agent?
No, I'm not. Are you? Are you, sir?
You are not.
Neither am I, sir.
Have you ever been a KGB agent?
No, I have not. Have you, sir?
He's a KGB agent.
We are told by a colonel who defected from the KGB that 50% of the journalists in the Soviet Union are KGB agents.
Probably much fewer. It doesn't make any difference who is a KGB agent in that country or not. Everybody is when needed, and nobody is when not needed. The question is moot. You probably would do what the KGB tells you.
But you were never a KGB agent.
Not that I remember, no. I'm trying to play the Iran-Contra hearings here.
Go ahead, Vladimir.
Mort,
Go ahead.
Mort, these are KGB agents. I don't know if you're able to see this, but these are the KGB agents that surrounded us today we arrived and we wanted to go to the Ovir office. And the journalist who interviewed us from CNN was locked up the following week. And they tried preventing us from speaking to television cameras. And I said, isn't that great? I got
In this country?
No, I'm talking about Moscow.
Oh, in Moscow.
I was talking to some journalist in front of the Ovir office, and they surrounded us and tried to prevent us from talking to them. And I said, would that be nice if we tried to do the same to Mr. Gorbachev when he came here? And also, like, they disappeared and they melted away into the woodwork. They're very sensitive about that, by the way, when you accuse them of being KGB agents.
Vladimir, I noticed you were very sensitive about that. Well, you asked the word, was I ever a KGB agent?
No, you're entitled to an honest question.
You also made a statement, KGB agent, when needed. You were never needed?
No, I wasn't, but should they ever ask me, I would have said no, but most people would have said yes, probably.
That's a good answer. I'll buy that answer. I'll buy that answer, all right?
What? The whole country works. You have to understand something. Just because they may not be officially KGB agents, everybody has to report back to the authorities if they see something unusual. We were taken around with a guide. Now, there's no question about it that guide reported back everything we did.
Sure.
And if he didn't, his job would be at stake, and he'd be accused of being a spy for the United States of America. And so that's everybody who's there is fearful because they don't know who the next guy is and who he's reporting to.
Do you think that, for instance, Martin, that Gorbachev is in a good and strong position in the Soviet Union with all facets of the military and the Politburo?
Absolutely not. Gorbachev is in a very fragile position. He has a very, very short time frame left.
What does he have to do to prove his worth to stay in that job? Does he have to sell our country the goods on Glasnost?
If Gorbachev doesn't come back with something very substantive in terms of value to the Soviets, which is not missiles and agreements and paper. Paper means very little to them. Something substantive like World Bank membership, International Monetary Fund membership, most favored nation trade status within the United States.
And he has to come back with more than one of those things, too, doesn't he?
He must. Well, most favored nation trade status would give him the other two in a very short time.
It would automatically give him World Bank status.
Yeah.
In which we American taxpayers would be lending him our money.
We're doing that now. We're doing that now, by the way.
The big question for us is not how we can democratize the Soviet Union or what their policy should be. We can do very little to affect that. But what our policy should be here toward them while they're not in compliance with what they've solemnly agreed to do. We are now financing the bombs that are falling on the children of Afghanistan. And we're financing them through American taxpayer-guaranteed banks, FDIC-guaranteed banks. You have banks like First Chicago, which earlier this year lent $200 million at 1/8 of 1 point above cost with 5-year forgiveness on payments. They've never lent...
The Soviet Union?
To the Soviet Union. They've never lent
none of us in here could go in and get a loan for 3% over prime.
You can't get it. That bank and other banks, like Manufacturers Hanover and Chemical and all of them, are taking farmers' savings, foreclosing America's farms, and lending them to the Soviet Union at rates they've never lent to any American. And
you believe this crap? You believe this crap?
And the Soviet Union is buying... The Soviet Union is buying guns and bombs and missile parts and dropping little toy bombs on the children of Afghanistan and blowing off their limbs. And the State Department, when our organization brought this to the State Department, we asked them, can you track those funds to see if those funds are really used for wheat? Do you know what those funds are used for? They said, no. And I said to them, I said, can you assure us that those funds are not being used for guns, bombs in Afghanistan? And they said, no.
They couldn't track it.
They cannot track it. The funds are fungible. So until you have a regime which will comply with what it's agreed to do, complied with its obligations under Helsinki,
let me ask you a question.
Then why give them the benefits of the money that was included?
I agree with you, but let me ask you a question. Why in the name of God can't we get our media in this country to let the American people know what's happening? We don't know about the $200 million at 1/8 of 1%, all right? We never hear about that. We know about it now. We don't know about Manufacturers Hanover, and if I'm insulting any sponsors, tough luck, all right? We don't know about any of that stuff. The press never prints it.
I had hearings on this, and I said this all the time to the press. if I were to hold hearings on who's investing in South Africa, you can be assured that there'll be every major press person will be there covering that situation. But when we talked about Manufacture Hanover Trust giving out money, loaning money to the Soviets, no one cared. What we need is more Morton Downeys down there to expose the Soviets.
The unwanted. Soviets who leave and those who can't leave. We're going to find out about that next. Welcome back, America. Welcome back, all who want to be free, all right? Our program now moves to Rabbi Avi Weiss, who has joined us at our home base. He's with the Hebrew Institute in Riverdale, strong supporter of Soviet Jewry, and also joining us at the Loudmouth is Boston University professor Anatoly Davidov. He is defected from the USSR in 1975 while on assignment. Anatoly, we've been hearing for weeks now in advance of the summit, of course, of all the good things that are happening in Russia. If everything is moving in the right direction, why did you defect?
I don't know. I'm just listening to your discussions. You all sound like a bunch of unreconstructed hawks. I mean, let's give Mr. Gorbachev some chance. He's between a hard rock and a... No, what's the expression? No. Hold on. Hey, you...
Give him a chance.
Hey, may I say something?
Anatoly, what? Wait a second.
Hey.
Anatoly, give him a chance to what?
Give him a chance to run this dying empire. He's in a very difficult position. You tried to run 280 million people.
A lot of times, Anatoly, when people are dying or drowning, they drag other people down with them. We don't want to go with them.
Yeah, but I think we're strong enough to be friendly to the Russians because we are strong enough, and because hatred and hostility. No, they're not low life. Don't say that. Listen, because hatred and hostility is a sign of insecurity.
Well,
Listen,
I'll tell you,
I have
the
more
2.5
reasons
million
than
Jews
all of
must
you
be
to hate the
insecure.
Soviet Union, and I don't hate them.
Fight fire with that.
Listen, nobody's firing it.
What would you suggest we do then? All right, let's try and approach this in a peaceful way,
well,
and let's not give it so much time. You know that our wounds are
very
open.
simple. What we should do, we should be very strong and very friendly, and one should not go without the other.
What should the friendliness include? Should it include favored nation status, World Bank membership,
Listen,
all these things?
I don't want to specify what it should include. I just think that the hostility, it's not a right way to approach them. Hey,
well, you know, should we in a show of friendship to the Soviet Union, should we send back all the defectors from the Soviet Union who came here, such as yourself? Should we just send them back and say, look, we're sending you back your citizens. We want the citizens of the Soviet Union who wish to go to Israel to go to Israel. Would that be a fair show of friendship?
Now, let me ask you something else. Let's say that the Soviet Union would open their borders and 100 million Russians would want to come to the United States. Are we able to accept them? Of course not. Well, I mean, maybe...
Everyone else comes here.
Well, you see, everyone else doesn't live in a prison-like society like the Soviet Union. Soviet society is a prison-like sort of place of
incarceration. Then why should we be friendly with a prison-like society? You're saying the same thing, that if we had been friendlier with Adolf Hitler, maybe the Jews and the Greeks and the Arabs and the Irish and the Catholics wouldn't have been slaughtered by him.
What is your answer? Your answer is to hate them and to denounce them?
No, my answer is not to hate them. My answer is to be ever vigilant of every single gift they bring. Go ahead, Antonio. I think we have to be vigilant. I think we should offer our hand, but maybe always have it ready to turn into a fist. Right. Let me ask Rabbi Weiss, please. Is the problem of immigration only a problem of the Jews?
It's a problem across the board, but Jews especially suffer within the Soviet Union. And one of the things we have to be very careful about, and the reason why some of us were arrested, a peaceful arrest last week, is that
in this country,
our message to Gorbachev is that no matter where he goes, the voice of moral conscience is going to haunt him. He's trying to release just some high-powered dissidents in an attempt to lull all of these people to sleep. And we're here to tell Mr. Gorbachev that we insist upon the release of one prisoner from the Soviet Union. And that's all Soviet Jews, and for that matter, that's all people who wish to leave. That we're not going to tolerate just dealing with humanitarian issues, which deals just with specific cases, but we want a resolution of human rights. That's the freedom of all people within the Soviet
Morton,
Union.
is the United States Senate going to ratify this treaty? We understand that, I understand that earlier today, Bob Dole, one of the Republican candidates, came out in favor of ratification of this treaty.
I think it will probably be ratified with some, quote, reservations, which mean nothing. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, there are things which don't require Senate ratification. For example, the president may grant MFN to the Soviets, most favored nation trade status, without any Senate action at all. He can do it with his own waiver.
Mm-hmm. That's executive order.
Yes, but just picking up just briefly on what was just said here a moment ago, when Gorbachev had his much touted interview with Tom Brokaw, on the basis of immigration, he said that we have differences on these issues. We don't have differences in these issues, and we can't let that go by without comment. They signed, in the Russian language, they signed the Helsinki Accords, in which we agreed what the standards are. We agreed what immigration should be. And instead, it's turned around to say that, well, because we don't let people in our country, we have a problem with immigration too. That wasn't part of the Helsinki Accords. The Helsinki Accords only had to do with people being free to leave any country, including their own.
Let me ask you a question. Why did the Soviet Union feel intimidated into signing those Helsinki Accords at that time? What was their motivation at that time? What were they trying to gain?
The biggest the straw card was that it sealed up the borders. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was most favored nation trade status was turned down because of the Jackson-Vanik Amendment, which had just preceded the Helsinki Accords. Now they're fully online for getting most favored nation trade status. And they're going to get it. This administration's made the decision to do it. And the only thing that will hold it back is if people become enough aware that this is not a political issue and it's not something of the unreconstructed right wing or hawks, as has just been referred to, and it's not an issue of arms, and it's not even an issue of human rights. This is, most favored nation trade status is a taxpayer issue. The Soviet government owes right now, through the Soviet bloc and Comecon, owes Western banks over $100 billion. They will not have, in your great-grandchildren's lifetime, the foreign exchange to ever repay it back. And anyone who wants to do business with the Soviet Union, until they comply with Helsinki, and until they put their currency on the market, I challenge them to accept payment in rubles. Absolutely. As long as they want payment in dollars.
Let me remind those who would chastise the right wing, all right? They're usually from the left wing. And this great bird of America doesn't fly with only one wing, pal. We'll be back. Would like our audience at home and our studio audience to see an insert in this program from a previous show that we did with Stanislav Levchenko, who was a major who defected from the KGB. might give you a little insight into their treatment, their glasnost and their treatment of Jews. Would you run that? Are they ever going to be really free?
Let's put it in a different way. It's problem of emigration from the Soviet Union. We're not talking just about Jews. However, Jewish people go through all kinds of difficult times, and it's no secret that Soviet government uses Jews like money. And, you know, whenever time comes, you know, to develop better relations for one reason or other with this country, more Jews are being let out of the Soviet Union.
In other words,
when relations go down,
I understand that
Jewish
they
people
almost use Jews as money there when they want something from the United States. They
okay,
let five go,
you're
and all of
trying
a
never
sudden
to
we
withdraw
say it's
all your
wrong.
money from your saving account, right? That's why there is no way for all Jews to get out of the Soviet Union, because it's always, you know, there'll be kind of like poker game, you know, around them.
Rabbi, let me ask you. Let me ask you a question. We were talking about your arrest earlier. All right, you were arrested in this country. Let me press you on that arrest. What happened?
We stepped over. There is a federal law that says that you cannot stand in protest within 500 feet of any foreign embassy. And so we walked over the line and we were offering prayers for Soviet Jews. And at that point, we were arrested. Whereas if you commit the same crime in front of the South African embassy, you go scot-free. But the Russians have been pressing the Americans to prosecute us. And America, tragically, has bent and has probably spent last year a day in detention center on that issue.
All right, I hope our American citizens realize what is going on in the Soviet Union, and I hope they realize, my black friends and my white friends and my Hispanic friends and my Oriental friends, that if the Soviet Union is granted favored nation status, then by God we should grant it to South Africa too.
Let me say this. America means a great deal to me. And we have much to thank Reagan and Schultz for what they've done for Soviet Jewry. But the reality is that the United States government and this administration has not done far enough. The Soviet Union needs American trade. The Soviet Union needs American currency. And by golly, they're getting American trade and they're getting American currency, and they're not opening the doors. And so our motto very simply is no trade and no aid till Soviet Jews are free. We were outraged. We were outraged, as was said by every former Soviet prisoner of Zion in that demonstration of 200,000 just a few weeks ago. We were outraged that at the end of the summit, with all of the human rights hype, that this administration, through its Commerce Secretary Verity, set up a meeting between Gorbachev and 60 key American business leaders. That sends the wrong message to Moscow. Moscow laughs at the rhetoric of the United States if you don't back up that rhetoric with real action. As long as Moscow receives the trade and the money, then they'll allow the Americans to speak all of the human rights that they wish. Now, America has, for compellingly moral reasons, said that trade must be linked to human rights on the apartheid issue in South Africa. And America should do no less when it comes to the denial of human rights to my people and other people in the Soviet Union.
I'm going to make a very nasty statement, all right? And I probably will live to regret this. I hope not. But it's a true statement. Sir, your people represent 2% of the population of this country, all right? The South African situation represents 17% of the population of this country. Does that give you an idea that maybe it's numbers that are being played with human lives rather than the morality of what has to be played with human lives?
And we stress the morality of the issue. So we stood outside last year when the Mosiev or the Bolshoi opened up in Moscow, or when the Soviet basketball team comes and plays the NBA basketball teams, or now the Soviet Hockey League wants to come in for games which will count against the NHL. And I've got one damn question. I ask, would the NBA be prepared to play against a government-sponsored South African team? Would the NHL be prepared to play against a South African government team? And the answer is a resounding no.
Okay. They don't have any ice in South Africa, all right? But the point is, there should be no trade with South Africa. There should be no trade with the Soviet Union. But let me ask you a question. How do you feel about Soviet Jews coming here rather than going to Israel?
Well, the truth of the matter is, here I speak as a rabbi as well, the best place for Jews to be absorbed, where they can live amongst so many of their own people within a unique Jewish destiny, is the land of Israel.
All right.
And so it's my position that in terms of the absorption of people coming out of a dictatorial, totalitarian society, that the best place for them is the Jewish homeland.
Let me introduce you to a brother and sister here, all right? One who is in the United States and one who is from Israel. Would you be kind enough to tell us your story, please?
Well, in 1975, it became obvious to my family, and as a matter of fact, it became obvious first to my father, whose picture you can see.
You see his picture in front of you.
Yes, that we should leave Soviet Union. As a matter of fact, he told us that our family should leave Soviet Union, not because of our children, only because of our grandchildren. And he kept on saying this. So finally in 1980 we left Soviet Union, me, my sister and my mother. And my father didn't want to jeopardize our departure from Soviet Union because in 1961 he has retired from Soviet Army.
He was with the Soviet Air Force, am I correct? He was Lieutenant Colonel.
He was Lieutenant Colonel.
He was honored many times. He led an American B-17 to safety in the Soviet Union, saving the lives of the 6 crew members.
No, it was about either 11 or 13 crew members.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact...
And your sister is in Israel now?
Yes.
And you're here visiting in this country?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you ever expect to see your dad again?
It depends on how much pressure we put on Soviet Union. As a matter of fact, my father has already 3 grandchildren. 2 are American citizens, born American citizens, and 1 is born Israeli Sabra. And he has never seen either one of them.
How could you leave your father?
It was, he didn't want to jeopardize our departure of his family and for the wealth of whole family. Only now, being father myself, I understand how strong a man should be and how much he should love his family.
If the Soviet Union changed tomorrow and you saw that there was a chance of peace over there, would you go back?
No way.
You still wouldn't?
No, I wouldn't, because what was built in Soviet Union over generations, over thousands of years, you cannot change even in one lifetime. And no, as a matter of fact, Glasnost so far it worked for me. I'm allowed, please notice, I'm allowed to apply to visit Soviet Union, which I'm going to do in January to see my
I wish you luck, and I hope you get back here when you visit them. Rabbi, quickly, we're going to go to our audience in a minute, but I wanted to ask you a question. I think it's an important question. The Soviet Union the government of the Soviet Union is an atheistic government, all right? And yet last week, Mr. Gorbachev made a reference to God. Does this indicate a new religious freedom in Russia?
Absolutely not. The problem with Gorbachev is that he's so deceptive, he's so suave, and he says things that are so basically untrue. And that's what we have to be very, very careful about. What he says about God and what he says about glasnost, what he says about openness is just patently false. I find it ironic that under the oppressive Brezhnev, everybody was uptight when he allowed over 50,000 Jews to leave in '79. And here the liberal Gorbachev is allowing 7,000 Jews to leave, and everybody is jumping for joy.
I bet you the American people have something to say about that, and this is the American people in this audience. I'm going to hear from them next.
Are you tired of sitting home watching the same old boring television shows? Television is alive again at Channel 9, so be a part of our studio audience, if you dare. For tickets, call right now, 201-867-TIXX.
Glasnost. The American press, the American media have been shoving it down our throats. We've seen Gorby and his wife and holding hands and all the bullcrap that goes along with it. I mean, we're led to believe that these are the average American couple, let alone Soviet couple. You folks have been following it. You know, they try to give the younger folks, they try to say that we don't know what the hell's going on in this country. I think we're a lot wiser than those old cracker brains that they got down in down in Washington, D.C. How about you?
How you doing, Morton? I think you and Donald Trump should run for president. I tell you, I sympathize with the Jews in Russia, but my major concern is with the United States. The Soviet Union has never adhered to their arms agreement, which is the bottom line, in the past.
Or any other treaty.
Or any other treaty, right. So I feel it is imperative for the United States to keep the Star Wars shield that they're trying to steal from us. I think, you know,
Yes, you're right. Not only trying to steal from us, but probably have a 15-year head start and need to have favored nation status so we can send them our technology so that they can put their own SDI in effect. You, sir.
Morton, let's not just stop catering to the Russians. Let's stop catering to everybody, and let's worry about ourselves first.
Okay, well, that's a good point. It's somewhat utopianistic, but by the same token, we live in such a large world now that our own concerns sometimes are the concerns of other people. So unless we wish to enclose ourselves in a wall, we're always going to have to be concerned with... go ahead, you want to step back up and say... Go ahead, you can come back up for a second.
Excuse me, Morton, but if we can't feed and clothe and take care of ourselves, then we can't... How could we help other people?
Well, you got a good point. Let's clothe and feed our own people. Let's clothe and feed our own people. You, sir.
Yes, I just have a question for the gentleman up on the stage. What role does the United Nations play in this sort of situation, if any?
Well, the United Nations for our people is an absolute negative. There's nothing good that the United Nations has done for Israel. The United Nations has decided that Zionism is racism. The reality is that the people with the key, the human key to open the doors to the Soviet Union is the United States government. And I'll tell you something. Every Jew is very much driven by the Holocaust. And we know that during the Holocaust, tragically, that the United States government did little to save Jews. It could have done much more. So we're especially sensitive then to what our government is and is not doing for our people. And we will never permit our governments to make the same mistake of silence that they committed 45 years ago. And as a matter of fact, we will never permit Jewish leadership to make the same mistake they made 45 years ago. And I'm serving notice, Mort, to Jewish leadership today, that if Jewish leadership has cut any deal with the White House and with Gorbachev, and if Jewish leadership is prepared to lower immigration levels and to do away with Jackson Vanik, that there are good Jews out there and good human rights advocates, because this is human rights issues, who will not tolerate it. And will
you are willing to admit, then, that there are some Jews who would sell out other Jews?
I'm willing to admit that a deal has been cut, and we will never, ever tolerate that kind of subterfuge, ever.
The gentleman, you can perhaps address his question, too.
Yeah. With regard to the United Nations has served lately as a vehicle through which Western democracies, specifically the United States and Israel, have been very much taken to task for all their values. The question we have to answer is, where will we stand for our values? Earlier we discussed South Africa and apartheid. The values must stay the same. We must stand for certain principles. If constructive engagement is no good with South Africa, then constructive engagement is no good with the Soviet Union.
You bet your life.
You can promote glasnost. You can promote glasnost by standing up for our values. And it's not a right-wing issue or a left-wing issue. Stand for what's signed. They've solemnly taken obligations upon themselves, not our principles, their principles. Enforce their principles, and then we can move forward. And encourage glasnost by holding the carrot out there.
Opportunity to talk. You, sir. Go ahead, sir.
I think if Gorbachev saw stepped-up violence and harassment against Soviet diplomats, Soviet installations in America and abroad, he would have gotten the message much better than 250,000 Jews who are marching in Washington, which is nothing wrong with it, but the Russian bears, don't mind 250,000 Jews marching. They do mind when their own people are being blown up, or when some crazy people violently harass, beat, and do other such things to people in the Russian diplomatic missions.
I think it's also important to remember that the United States should also remember, while they're kidnapping our citizens over in the Arab nations, maybe if we reacted the same way the Soviet Union did when their guy was taken, all right, and sent back a finger and then the hand, then they'd leave American citizens alone. We'll be right back. Stand by. good to see the American flag flying here today. It's flying in this gentleman's pocket, and I bet it flies in his heart,
Thank
too.
you very much, Mr. Downey, and I think everybody here... I'm announcing my candidacy today. No, that's a joke. What I want to say is this. We don't have to go to Russia to see the type of fanatics that they are. We see them right here in the United States. When they come to visit us, who puts the bill? The State Department. Who's the State Department? It's us. They're in the United Nations and in the UN. They're nothing but spies, and we have to put the bill for them over there. We have to feed them, bathe them,
Just
and
gave
get
the
their
UN,
prostitutes for
just
them
gave
because
the
they
UN
can't get it
90
over
minutes,
there.
all right? 90